countdown is on.
Again, good protection for Childs. What's the end zone with Basunis? And was that picked off in bounds? Looks like this time it was from Jalen Husky. One-on-one again. This time it might be successful. It is! Ty Felton touchdown.
Edwards steps up in the pocket, looks to the end zone. Touchdown! Octavian Smith somehow held on.
It's time for 25 teams in 25 Grums.
And today the focus turns to the east. And Nebraska's Week 7 opponent, the Maryland Terrapins, who last time they sauntered into Lincoln, they stole a victory. Whew. But Nebraska goes to Maryland this time. Last time that happened, Nebraska actually had its probably best game under Scott Frost.
It's one of the few good games they had
One
under
of the
Frost.
few.
Yeah.
Well, let's find out what 2025 has in store for Maryland as we welcome in from Inside Maryland Sports, member of the 24/7 Network, Jeff Ermann, who covers the Terrapins. Jeff, thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So with where this program has been under Mike Loxley and now looking at the new era of college football, the portal, the rev share era, how strongly do you think Maryland football is poised?
I think it's tough coming off a year that was as rough as last year was to say where they stand at this time. I will say that I think the ceiling is higher. There's more of an opportunity, obviously, now that everyone has the same rev sharing, quote unquote salary cap. Now that the divisions are gone, they don't have to play Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State every year. This year they only play one. So, the potential is there, but you can only be a sleeping giant for so long before you're just sleeping.
Yeah, it's been really interesting, Jeff, because I'd forgotten about it until I was reading a story earlier this morning that he also vented about his frustrations in a book that came out last year. Armin Katayan, John Talty, the authors of The Price, and he talked about it then. So this has perhaps been like a constant theme from him over the last, 18 to 24 months, depending on when he spoke to those authors.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a tough scenario for him. You look at some of these other schools, Nebraska included, and then obviously the powers of the conference, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State. If it's all coming down to money, some of the amount that they're spending on these rosters, then Maryland just simply couldn't compete with that. So last year they had, I think, a $3 million roster, whereas Indiana was somewhere over 10 million, and all these other schools had so much more. You're just very rarely going to be able to overcome that. So I think it does give them a little more of an opportunity.
Talking with Jeff Ermann of Inside Maryland Sports as we preview the Terrapins in 25 teams and 25 Grums. So the story at quarterback, Malik Washington is the future, but Justin Martin comes over from UCLA out of the portal. What do you anticipate will be the situation at quarterback in opening week?
Yeah, Mike hasn't really shown his hand on that one. My guess is that Malik Washington will likely be the starter. I can definitely see a scenario where maybe even if he's the expected starter, you start Justin Martin the first week or two just to let Washington, take a little bit of pressure off, even though it's against lower level opponents. Let him come into the game and get in the flow. But, by all accounts, he's lived up to all the hype. He's the number 5 quarterback recruit in the country this year, and I think there's a pretty good chance he'll be their starter as a true freshman.
Jeff, sticking with the offense, you wrote about Nolan Ray recently for the website, saying a breakout is expected from him. The redshirt sophomore has generated buzz since arriving 2 years ago. He's interesting to me because he kind of reminds me of a Husker running back as well, just given solid production, but wondering what it could mean if the carries increase over the course of a full season. What are you expecting to happen with him in 2025?
Yeah, I think he's, one of their top breakout guys this year. Last year, he averaged 5 yards a carry behind Roman Hemby, who's now gone playing for Indiana. So, I think this is the year where he sneaks up on a lot of people in the conference because there's not a lot of preseason hype about him, understandably, but he's one of the faster, one of the faster, shiftier combo running backs they've had in a while.
Talking with Jeff Ermann of Inside Maryland Sports, the Terps rebuilt its receivers through the portal for a team that really struggled offensively, especially in the second half of the season. You've got Farouk and Webb from Oklahoma and Tennessee, respectively. What are they expected to bring this year that Maryland was maybe lacking?
Well, I don't think you're really going to get something necessarily you're lacking because, two of those guys went in the draft,
right.
Obviously Ty Felton and Caden Prather. So you're really just hoping to be somewhat as good as you were last year at the position, considering there's not a lot of proven guys. But, Farouk was the guy at Oklahoma, showed he had number one receiver potential, and then he had an injury. Local guy who's back home, they expect a lot out of him. And then, like you said, the Webb kid from Tennessee was a former 4-star, really good athlete, but still, hasn't put a lot of stats on paper. So I don't know, you hope that he can pan out and be one of your top two guys, but he hasn't proven it. And, the other guy to watch is Octavian Smith. He's been around. He's a senior now. He's been playing regularly since his true freshman year. And, they feel like he's a guy who could really take off and be a legit number one or number two receiver this year.
Speaking of pass catchers, Jeff, Dorian Fleming, Georgia State product from last year. He had 6 touchdowns, put up close to 600 yards as a freshman. Obviously jumping up a level. What is the expectation? How good can he be?
Yeah, they like him a lot. They felt like he was one of the best guys they got out of the portal. They think he's an upgrade over the tight ends they had last year who were pretty good. There's still a question about the depth behind him, but, I think there's a real chance he could be in the top tier of tight ends in the conference.
Talking with Jeff Ermann of Inside Maryland Sports, one of the better pickups out of the portal was Ratrell Perry on the offensive line. How does that group shape up this year?
Well, they feel like it'll be improved, but, we need to see that to believe it, I think, because it's largely the same guys who really struggled last year, arguably the conference's poorest offensive line play all season. And so, they did add Perry, like you said, a tackle who had offers from a lot of schools, including Ohio State and a bunch of others. They have some guys back. Alan Heron is a kid last year who was highly touted but struggled. They feel like he's much improved this year. And then they have Isaiah Wright, who was a transfer from Buffalo, who was believed to be one of their best offensive linemen last year, but was injured before the season and never played. They have him back, so they feel like the unit isn't improved. But, with the way it played last year, that desperately needs to be accurate.
Jeff, looking at the defense, a lot of people are saying that the biggest question mark is that front seven. If you agree with that, I wonder if you think the sub-biggest question mark is with the front four, or is it with the linebackers?
The front four, to me. The linebackers, you might think that that'd be where it was just because they lost a couple of starters, Caleb Wheatland and Kellen Wyatt in the portal, but they have a lot of young talent emerging there. Including a kid named Daniel Wingate, who I think is going to be a star. The defensive line, they brought in some veteran transfers, but they're not big names. They're guys they liked, but, you lose 2 players who were drafted on that unit also. And it's, there's a lot of younger talent there, or guys who were, viewed as 4-stars and such, but everybody needs to pan out there because obviously, in the Big Ten, you can't win without being able to hold up in the trenches.
And the pass rush really struggled this year. How much has that been a focus in camp?
Yeah, that is definitely a focus. They're playing under a different defensive coordinator, Ted Monachino, who's, from everything that's being said, will be more aggressive than the previous coordinator, Brian Williams. But like you said, the pass rush was very weak last year. They have some young guys who they think that will help them there, but that's another area that, you really need to take a step up in.
Jeff, last one from me. And going back to the beginning of the conversation about some of the things that Loxley said, there was a quote from Daniel Wingate recently where he talked about the weird tension in the locker room last year. He said once the losing started going on, there was a lot of bickering going back and forth, a lot of this guy shouldn't be playing, this guy shouldn't be doing that. It was a mess. Like, how big of a concern do you think that is for this season, that this has all become very public now in a short amount of time, and that it could affect the Terps in a negative way?
Well, if you believe, Loxley's theory, which is that it was based on not having enough money, basically, compared to opponents. So there were haves and have-nots in the locker room, is how he stated it. Then they should be in better shape now with the amount they're spending under the revenue sharing deal. So, that's been the company line. That last year was a lot of it was just not enough money to go around. And then once things went downhill, the wheels fell off the bus. But it's hard for us to say without being in that locker room. I assume a lot of it, again, comes down to how well the season's going.
Jeff Ermann, Inside Maryland Sports. Jeff, we always wrap up these previews with a little rapid fire, a quick answer session. Are you ready?
Sure.
All right, here we go, Nick.
Rapid fire.
Rapid fire.
You do not throw rocks at a man who's got a machine gun.
Rapid fire.
The most important player this season for Maryland.
Oh, wow. Probably Malik Washington, just because, he's the future at quarterback, and, he's the face of Maryland moving forward.
Player that you're most interested to see how they contribute this year.
I'll go back to Nolan Ray, the running back. I think he could be a star this year.
What is the floor expectation this year for Maryland?
If you listen to Vegas, it's not very high. They've got them at a 4.5 over-under on wins. So, anytime you have that, your floor is probably in that 2 or 3 win range. But, I don't think that'll happen. But after last year, you never know.
The thing that you love most about this year's team is?
The amount of emerging and young talent they have. Loxley's recruited really well the past several years. So this doesn't have all the household names on it, but it has a lot of guys with high ceilings.
The thing that worries you most about this team?
The trenches, offensive and defensive lines. Offensive line was very poor last year, has most of the same guys, and defensive line doesn't have really many proven commodities at all.
If you had 10 grand riding on it, what is your regular season record prediction?
I'll probably go 5 wins. I think they're talented but young. The schedule's easier than usual, but it's tough, especially with likely a true freshman under center.
What percentage chance do you give Maryland of beating Nebraska?
I'd say that looks like a classic 50-50, maybe 60-40 kind of game. It's hard to know. Nebraska looks improved, but it is at Maryland. I'll say 50-50.
Your conference champion pick this year?
I know everyone likes Penn State, but I got to go with the Buckeyes.
And give me 3 teams that you would wager to win the national title.
Oh, wow, that's a tough one. I'm going to go with the Buckeyes, still proven otherwise. Georgia, and who's a good third one? We'll be conference homers and throw Penn State in there.
Jeff Ermann, Inside Maryland Sports. Jeff, have a great weekend. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Jeff.
Jeff Ermann from Inside Maryland Sports, Terrapins 24/7. So here we go. The Maryland Terps.
Easy sketch to start.
Yep. Florida Atlantic, Northern Illinois, and Towson before they go to Wisconsin. There is a chance that this is a 4-0 football team heading into the Idle Week.
Could be.
And then host Washington, host Nebraska.
That'll be a cross-country flight for Washington.
Let's just pretend.
They're
For
undefeated?
argument's sake, let's pretend.
Big noon kickoff.
Let's pretend.
To College Park,
Well,
Maryland.
I wasn't going to say that. But let's say, because I think best case scenario,
Dave Portnoy eating pizza.
I think best case scenario, Maryland is 4-1 versus going into the Nebraska game.
I would agree. That is best case. More likely, they're probably 3-2.
If it's truly a 50-50 battle, that being that is Nebraska's first true road game.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Could be a little interesting, especially if Malik Washington is living up to expectation.
By the way, so commenter Jimmy said that he thinks Washington has a 70% chance to win the game. Meanwhile, according to K Ford, Nebraska has a 75% chance. No, he's saying Maryland has a 70% chance to win.
If you look at K Ford.
No, I'm saying the listener, Jimmy, is saying he says Maryland has a 70% chance to win the game.
Why are we quoting weird people?
He's a listener. I was using that as a way to say, but K Ford says 75 for Nebraska.
I'm going to trust K Ford on this one.
Okay.
At UCLA, then another idle week, and then they finish up with Indiana, at Rutgers, at Illinois, Michigan State.
And remember, Michigan State is at Ford Field in Detroit.
That is true. K Ford says 5-7 with a 35% chance of 6 wins.
Yeah, I think this could be the last year for Loxley.
He's recruited well, though.
Yeah, but I don't think that this is going well. I don't think that this is going in the right direction.
Depending on Maryland's financial situation, and of course, now because of the portal, I mean, if things really go south, maybe Malik Washington ends up going to another school. But presuming that you could keep the young talent, it could be an interesting job to walk into for a first-year coach.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because you're going to be in this conference and you're going to have to go up, and at least they're not in the Big Ten East anymore, but they still got a lot of stuff to deal with.